Now, Werner von Blomberg, the Minister of War, there on the right, he was a widow. He was a widow. And one day, he goes to Hitler, and he says, "Mein Führer, I'm in love. There's this woman I'm in love with. I want to marry her. But there's a problem. She is 35, or pardon me, she was about 30, so, no, she's in her late 20s. She was 35 years younger than him, okay? She's 35 years younger than him. Now, that's not such a big deal. Throughout European history, it's not uncommon for older men to marry younger women. It's not uncommon. The problem was this. Werner von Blomberg, he's a von. He's an aristocrat. He is from this noble Prussian family. He is, the premier military officer of the country. He has a lot of prestige. The army is granting him a lot of respect. And the problem is, this woman he wants to marry was his secretary. She came from very, very humble origins. She was poor. She came from a poor family. She was not noble, not even respected upper class. She was lower middle class, right? Lower middle class. And Blomberg knows the rest of the officers would not approve. Just the class differences were too great. It's unseemly for a man of von Blomberg's standing to marry a woman who is so low born. And this is real. This is German conservatism as it existed at the time, right? Someone high-born like that does not marry someone low-born. It just doesn't happen. But he's in love, and he wants to marry her. So he goes to Hitler, and he asks Hitler for permission. And what does Hitler say? Yes! This is fantastic! Because Hitler says, look at what we're doing. We are tearing down these class walls, these class barriers. We're tearing these things down. So Hitler is delighted. Hitler is absolutely delighted. So Hitler thinks this is a great idea. Okay? Hitler thinks this is awesome because, again, it breaks down class barriers. In Hitler's Germany, it doesn't matter if you're an aristocrat. It doesn't matter if you're low-born. We can cross these boundaries. These don't have the same meanings that they had traditionally had in German society. Hitler thinks this is a great thing. So not only does Hitler give his permission, Hitler insists on attending the wedding and being a witness at the wedding. He wants this to be a big public display of the new Germany. So Hitler and Goering both attend the wedding. They serve as witnesses. They sign the register. Hitler kisses the bride's hand. And then von Blomberg and his bride go to take like a 2 or 3 month honeymoon. They go to the Dutch East Indies. They go to different places. And not long after von Blomberg and his bride leave to go on this honeymoon, the Gestapo says to Hitler, we need to talk to you about something. We just found out. It turned out that von Blomberg's bride, before she was a secretary, she'd had a different profession, sometimes referred to as the oldest profession. Yeah. And there were also photographs of her in compromising positions. And supposedly when one Gestapo agent saw this, he said, my God, the Fuhrer kissed her hand. And so this was a big deal. And of course, Hitler is really upset about this. So Hitler immediately sends a message to von Blomberg, and he says, look, you screwed up here big time. And if you divorce her, return to your post right now, we'll forgive it. Now remember, because Hitler was always very sentimental. And von Blomberg had supported him during the Rom purge, and so he feels some kind of like he owes von Blomberg something. So he says, if you divorce this woman, you're going to get this wedding annulled, come back here, resume your post immediately, all's forgiven. And von Blomberg said, no, I'd rather stay married. So Hitler, of course, is livid that this officer turned him down. So he resigns. Von Blomberg resigns. Most of the army officers were absolutely disgusted with von Blomberg. So it's very kind of disrespectful, or very dishonorable, what happened to him. Well, okay, so that's von Blomberg. Now, very quickly after von Blomberg, after all this comes out of von Blomberg, something else happens here regarding von Fritsch here in the Senate. Von Fritsch, one day, not long after here, the Gestapo, now I should point out too, the Gestapo, Heinrich Himmler, probably knew this woman that married von Blomberg, probably knew she was a prostitute before they got married. He deliberately was trying to get this guy out of the way, right? That was, I mean, this was dirty tricks, the standard practice for the Gestapo here. Well, a few weeks later, the Gestapo goes to Hitler, and they say, we found something about von Fritsch. Von Fritsch was in a train station at Wannsee, which is kind of a suburb of Berlin. And we found him at Wannsee in this train station. We have a report from a guy who claims that in a restroom, von Fritsch essentially propositioned him. Von Fritsch was a bachelor, a lifelong bachelor. And of course, the assumption with any lifelong bachelor is, well, they're gay, right? And of course, it's not something you speak about politely at the time, but that's always this kind of unspoken assumption. But here you have somebody testifying that von Fritsch essentially propositioned in this bathroom in a train station. Well, they go to von Fritsch, and they say, "Is this true?" And he says, "Absolutely not." And he's very upset, and he's very angry that his honor is being called into question this way. So Hitler and the Gestapo, they conduct an investigation here, and Hitler, as we're going to see, is already beginning to mobilize the army for the invasion of Austria. Well, he kind of can't be dealing with this while he's trying to get that ready. So he essentially removes von Fritsch as commander-in-chief of the army. He removes von Fritsch as commander-in-chief of the army, but he doesn't dismiss him from the service or anything, because von Fritsch had denied it. Von Fritsch, after he's dismissed as commander-in-chief of the army, he demands a court-martial. He says, "You must court-martial me because you need to prove these allegations. I was wrongly removed from this position." So they hold a court-martial, and what the court-martial finds is it was a case of mistaken identity. The man who claimed that von Fritsch propositioned him actually had been propositioned by another army officer who had a similar name. And so this did not happen. The Gestapo, however, again, Himmler was probably working to get him out of the way. They were actively trying to ignore that. I think they had known this was a case of false identity, and they kind of tried to ignore that and sweep that under the rug because they're trying to eliminate him. But they succeed in getting him out of that post. Okay, in fact, von Fritsch will go back to commanding troops, and his honor is stained, even though he was proven that this was not the case. People still look at him funny, still, question his manliness and whatnot, and he has a hard time with it. And so when World War II breaks out, he's commanding an artillery unit in Poland, and he was looking to die. He exposed himself to enemy fire, and he was killed on the battlefield. So he had an honorable death at battle right at the beginning of World War II. Most army officers, as I say, they think getting rid of von Blomberg was right. He dishonored the army. He acted dishonorably. He was a fool. But most army officers thereafter thought von Fritsch got a raw deal. That he absolutely got a raw deal. That the Nazis had ousted him for political reasons. Okay. So in the wake of these two guys, these very important guys, the war minister and the commander-in-chief of the army being removed, you've got to figure out, okay, so how are we going to do this? And this leads to a very important shakeup in the army, and also in kind of the Foreign Office will also be shaken up here as well. Hermann Goering wanted to be war minister. Hermann Goering wanted to be war minister. And it's entirely possible he was in on trying to get rid of these guys. So Hermann Goering really puts himself out there to Hitler as the logical successor to von Blomberg here. But the thing of it is, Joseph Goebbels doesn't want Goering to become any more powerful. So you can start to see this infighting and this backstabbing that's going on in the Nazi regime. Joseph Goebbels does not want Göring to become any more powerful. So Goebbels says to Hitler, you know, mein Fuhrer, nobody could have direct command over the armed forces. No one could exercise that more judiciously, more intelligently than you. So he puts the idea into Hitler's mind, maybe you should be both Fuhrer, right, Chancellor and President, and Defense Minister at the same time. Now this is not, and that's exactly what Hitler will do. Hitler himself will take on the role of Defense Minister. This is not terribly uncommon, particularly when World War II starts. Winston Churchill, he'll be Prime Minister of the UK. He will also be the British Defense Minister. And Stalin, who is the head of the Soviet government, he actually doesn't become the head of the Soviet government until right before Hitler invades. He was just the head of the party, even though he ran the country. He will also become the Defense Minister of Russia, the Soviet Union. So that's not terribly uncommon to have your head of government also have a cabinet post as important as Minister of Defense. But, first of all, I'll get back to the military. The Foreign Office, we see a shakeup. Now, throughout Hitler's reign until 1938, his foreign minister had been this guy, Konstantin von Neurath. Konstantin von Neurath. Konstantin von Neurath was conservative. He was not a Nazi. He was a conservative. He's one of the, again, he was the foreign secretary when Hitler came in and he wasn't allowed to have a lot of Nazis in government. Konstantin von Neurath was his foreign minister. He had increasingly, I think he became a Nazi eventually. He started wearing a swastika. But by this point, Hitler never really liked or trusted von Neurath. He never thought von Neurath was really committed to National Socialism the way some of these other guys were. So in the wake of all this stuff, he fires von Neurath, and he brings in this guy here, Joachim von Ribbentrop. Joachim von Ribbentrop. Von Ribbentrop was an old-school Nazi, and Hitler liked him a lot for several reasons, not the least of which Hitler thought he understood the British. He thought he understood the British. Von Ribbentrop, prior to World War I, had actually traveled in North America. He spent a lot of time in Canada. So he spoke fluent English. He'd been a wine salesman, so he made international contacts throughout Europe. However, I can't remember the exact circumstances. He was not a von. He was not an aristocrat. He found a distant aunt and essentially paid her to adopt him so that he could add a title to his name. Okay, so which is a very un-Nazi thing to do, but he wants the title. So Joachim von Ribbentrop, and this guy, the thing of it is, like I say, Hitler thought a lot of him. He's an old fighter. He'd been with the party for a long time. As I say, Hitler thought he was an expert on the British. The fact of the matter was, he was an idiot. Every other Nazi thought he was one of the stupidest guys. Like he and Alfred Rosenberg, all the other Nazis thought these were the two stupidest guys in the regime, right? They really think Rosenberg's an idiot. Ribbentrop's an idiot here. And Ribbentrop, before he's recalled to become the new foreign minister, he had actually been the German ambassador to England. He'd been the German ambassador to England. And he'd made a hash of it. When George the Sixth was I think it was when George the Sixth was coronated, he went to the coronation. He was the official German representative to the coronation of George the Sixth. And at the coronation, when everybody's cheering George VI and his coronation, singing God Save the King, what does von Ribbentrop do? How does he show his enthusiasm? What does he do? He does this. As you can imagine, the British don't think too much of that, right? So the guy's an idiot. And then when they questioned him at Nuremberg, he was just not too bright. Anyway, and you can see he's wearing an SS uniform. He held the rank of general in the SS. The SS, and I didn't really get into like how the SS was organized. But you have different units within the SS. One of them was called the General SS, and everybody could belong to the General SS, which is just kind of more of a club than anything else, and that's what he was a part of. But he actually held the rank of general within the General SS, and so he liked to wear his SS uniform constantly. And Himmler liked him to wear it because it kind of showed that Himmler was his superior. So anyway, now back to the army. Hitler decides, okay, we're going to shake things up here. The High Command of the Army, which is Oberkommando der Heers, oh, I guess I don't have it on here. So the Oberkommando der Heers was OKH. Okay, OKH. This is the Oberkommando der Heers, High Command of the Army. Well, when Hitler makes himself defense minister, he essentially creates kind of a military staff to help him with military matters. And that military staff was called the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. The Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, High Command of the Defense Forces. So these are two different institutions. In theory, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht is kind of over the High Command of the Army, in theory. Because this is kind of Hitler's personal military staff. Okay? Whereas the Army still has the Great General Staff. And they pride themselves on, the Great General Staff, which has been around since the Napoleonic Wars. Well, he appoints as the Chief of Staff of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, Wilhelm Keitel. Wilhelm Keitel. Now, speaking of idiots, Wilhelm Keitel was an idiot. He is a military idiot. His virtue is, again, he's a yes man. He does whatever Hitler says. He actually came up through the artillery, and Hitler was at an exercise one day, and Hitler was asking Keitel questions about the artillery pieces. And Keitel didn't know anything. Hitler knew more about the artillery than Keitel did. And later, when it was over, Hitler was like joking with some of the other officers. Can you believe it? This guy came up through the artillery, and he doesn't even know this stuff? So Keitel was a guy that, again, Hitler liked because he did whatever Hitler told him. But he's not one of the more competent army officers. Now, they appoint as the head of the operations, and this stuff's going to be important when we get into World War II. His head of the operations, the guy that actually really, really runs it, who is smart, is this guy here, Alfred Jodl. Alfred Jodl. He'll be the operations officer for the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. And there's kind of a competition in Germany because the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht Alfred Jodl realized, in a modern war, we need a streamlined command structure for Army, Navy, Air Force. We need a streamlined command structure. But the Army does not want to surrender any of its sovereignty to something like OKW. Now, as I say, that's going to come into play when we get into the World War. So Hitler takes over from von Blomberg, but you still need a new commander-in-chief of the Army, head of the Oberkommando der Heers. And this is why I can't believe I don't have the slide. I thought for sure I made the slide. There's a guy named, probably going to misspell his last name. Yeah, I'm not spelling that right. Walter von Brauchitsch. Okay, Walter von Brauchitsch. And Walter von Brauchitsch, he will be the commander-in-chief of the Army. Now again, you need to remember this because when we get into World War II, there's going to be some pretty important things that go on with the way the Army and the military are organized.